Okay, now that we have our backgrounds completed and nice and dry, mine warped up a little bit. I was going to put something heavy on it, but I forgot to. It'll flatten out eventually. We want to come up with a focal image. Now, I like to use magazine photos a lot, but I don't always like to use them, as they are. And for this one, I'd like to use her, but I'd like to blow her up a little bit. And get a little bit more of her face. And at the same time, it's black and white, and I kind of want to give her some color. So I'm going to show you, this is the other, technique portion of this page, is I want to show you how I go about altering these to make them fit what my needs are at the time. But first, we need to figure out, you're going to obviously need to find a focal image. And then I have a copier that I can just copy, and I can enlarge and reduce things on it. So that's how I'm going to alter both the size of her as well as how I got, a copy of it, because this was actually just a photo out of a magazine. So I made a copy of it so that I could work on it. And then you need to go through the rest of your collage and come up with some collage items. Let me get my collage stuff here. Hang on just one second. All right, I'm just going to grab out a couple of folders. I have all different types of collage, and I keep it in various different ways. I have folders like this. I have drawers. I have books that I cut out of. So I have a lot of different collage stuff. Now I'm going to kind of get my girl, because I sort of already have something in mind. She kind of has an almost worried look on her face. Not completely, but just a little bit. And then she kind of has this animal print top on. So I'm thinking of going with something that fits with that. And I know I have some animal type of things. Like this is an elephant sculpture made out of wire, I believe. It came from an art book. So I might use him. I could also kind of go crazy and do like a really lush luxe sort of contrasting backdrop here. They're all upside down for whatever reason. I even have cut up paintings that I just throw in my collage. Try to flip a whole bunch of this over at one time. These are just some flowers I was using for an art piece. Those might be cute. We'll see if I end up with going with a wild animal sort of theme. Here's a really cool bat. More cut up paintings. Here's a cool dog with some shades. Ooh, look, check that out. Skull. Dinosaur skull, I'm guessing. I also put in here faces I like to draw from. Here's some interesting blue-footed something. Oops, birds. Let's see. I'm just kind of, at this point, I'm just grabbing out a bunch of animals because I know, I kind of feel like that's what I want to work with if I can. Maybe. Again, everything is upside down. I think I must have opened this folder up upside down. I think that's the problem here. I'm sure I have way more than enough to come up with something anyway at this point. And again, just like, you know, in all the other pages before, this is exactly how I go about coming up with an idea for a page, is just running through the process. So this is both animal print as well as it has some animals I could cut out. So I'm going to put it over here. These are a little bit animal print, so I could use some of those. I grabbed out this and these just because they kind of sort of have, I don't know, similar coloring, I guess you would say. I mean, not really, but sort of. That maybe I could incorporate somehow into the design. I'm just kind of thinking as I flip here really quick. Some of these papers I really like and some I really don't like. It's funny. No collection ever quite 100%. I like everything in it. All right. You know, I think this one might be interesting to use. We'll see. So, I kind of pulled this out, these out for the pattern. I pulled this out for the pattern, this. I pulled this based on color. I pulled these just because they kind of feel sort of like, I don't know, forestry. I pulled a handbag for no reason. I took this just because of the leaves. Again, the leaves, so that's more or less kind of like imagery. These because they contain animals, imagery, animals. So before I can really decide what I'm going to do, I think I'm going to work on my focal image. So I'm going to take all of this and put it aside. And this one's going to be a tough one because it could go a couple of different directions with what I have pulled out here. So we'll just have to see. So I'm actually going to move the page off to the side. And the first thing that I want to do is cut her out just so that I can get rid of the really busy background and I have a better idea of what I want. Now, because I know I want to blow her up a little bit, I'm not going to be able to use the entire image. I'll lose some of it when I blow it up. So I'm just going to kind of cut her off right here. And I doubt I'll even get all of her waist in, but, and then I'm not going to really fancy cut it. I'm not going to worry too much about all of the little edges. Just want to get rid of a large amount of the background. Because it's just kind of distracting, I think, when you're thinking about trying to compose something new. Okay, so now I have just the girl, and I'm actually going to pull the camera down so that we can focus a little more on her. And now I just want to do a little bit of altering. And I'm going to use color to do that. And I'm going to go kind of small on the brushes here. So I'm using just a number 2 round. And maybe this number 14 flat if I need a bigger, wider area. Let's see. And I think I'm going to, let me find this. I'm for the most part, I really want to get this coloring, I think, into the page. So I'm going to put these here just sort of to inspire me. And of course this, because I want to bring in the blue. Here, let's see. I pulled the camera down, I forgot. Okay, I'm going to pull, I want to use colors from these two predominantly. And then as well, include in there somewhere this blue, which I think when you see them together, these kind of, you know, go well with the page that we have. So that's sort of where I'm focusing when, so I've kind of got these sort of laid out here to the side so I can see all of them as I work with my girl. I'm going to get a little bit of coffee here. Now I'm not going to worry too much about like getting really drastic with altering her. I just, really want her to have some color. I'm going to use a flesh tone along with just white for her skin. Dig out my paints as I go. Then I'm going to use a little bit of burnt sienna, I think. Let's see if I can find burnt sienna. And for her cheeks and everything, I think I'm just going to go with my favorite fluorescent pink. Just because that's my favorite, absolute favorite color. And then I need a kind of warm yellow, so I'm going to go with the cadmium yellow, medium, and then I need my Payne's Gray. Now the Payne's Gray, I'm going to use both in its natural state to substitute any kind of a black, but then I'm also going to mix it with the burnt sienna to get a warm brown. So I'm just going to quickly put my paints out onto my paint palette. The paint palette was actually empty for once. I only had a tiny little bit of Payne's Gray left on it. That was it. So I actually have to sit and put out all my colors. Okay, so I have all my colors actually on my palette, and I'm going to put all of my paints away. And you know what? I kind of need a green as well, now that I think about it. I could make a green if I had put out some sort of a blue, but I really hadn't. So I'm actually just going to put out a little bit of this fluorescent green, a little bit of, and I can't say the name of this green, phallocyanine. It looks like this. It's like a blue-green, but the name is difficult. And then just in case I want a little bit different blue, see if I can find some processed cayenne in here somewhere. Maybe. I need to figure out a better paint drawer system. Okay, processed cayenne is a specific color. It's actually a color, or cyan, however, everybody has it different, but it's actually a color that you would use in printing. It's a printing term. But I love this blue. This is my all-time favorite blue. So it's pretty much what I use. Now if I'm oil painting, I use Prussian blue, because I don't have a processed cayenne in oil paints. Alrighty, so more coffee for me. I'm going to start out with her hair, actually, and I'm just going to take some of this yellow to start with, and I'm really just using paint and then water on my brush, and it's not going to, the final hair color isn't going to be this bright yellow, but that's where I kind of want to start anyway. Now it's really humid, or actually it's not all that humid, but it's nice and warm here. So my paints are going to dry out like this really quickly because I'm using water to help mix. You can use glazing medium, different brands of matte medium. You can use anything to help you mix if you need to get your acrylics to be more fluid. when I'm painting in this way, I want everything to be pretty fluid. I want it to move easily. I don't want to have to work at it. I don't want the paint to drag, the brush to drag along the paper, because I'm just using cheap copy paper here. Nothing fancy. And I'm just kind of touching over all of the areas that are hair. This is in part, I'm doing this to help me be able to easily see the hair. Get a little more paint. This is a, a professional photo from a magazine, so it's really blown out. There's a lot of white. There's very little shading in her face. And the hair is the same way. It's so blown out. And this will help me to sort of figure out where the hair is. Now I'm actually just going to, well, I almost put my brush in my coffee. I never do that. I'm going to move on and work on her shirt. And actually I'm going to work on the bottom piece here. It doesn't really need a lot. I'm just going to add a little tiny bit of Payne's Gray to it here and there. And to tell you the truth, I'm not actually trying to paint it as much as I am just trying to give it a painterly look, as instead of it looking so much like a photograph. I just want to give it a hint of a more handmade look. Okay. Now her little top that she's wearing in here underneath is really dark, like maybe it was a black. I'm going to try to make it a brown. So I'm just going to mix the burnt sienna and the Payne's Gray together and get a nice rich brown. It's probably 1 part Payne's Gray to 2 parts burnt sienna, I'm guessing, for the brown that I like. I'm going to add just a little bit of white because I am going over such a dark color. And then for the top, I'm just going to go to my flat brush. And I'm just going to go, let's see, I think I'm going to go a little bit to the yellow-red side of things. So I'm going to take some burnt sienna and some of that medium-hued cadmium yellow. And so I'm kind of looking at trying to get a little more like this color. We'll see if I achieve that. And get some white, put it in here. I think I'm just going to take some of this brown to kind of knock it down a little bit. Okay, and I'm actually going to rinse my brush because I used my brush to mix, so it was really loaded with color. So I rinsed it, I got it, re-wet it. Now I'm just going to pick up a little bit of this color. And again, I'm working directly with just a copy on copy paper, so it's not going to be like it would be if I were working on a, like a prepped prepped canvas that had been gessoed or anything like that. So it's not going to be like this perfectly smooth surface. It's going to soak up paint pretty quickly. So there's going to be places where it's a little bit darker, that's okay. Not looking for perfection, just looking for fun. Now I have an inkjet printer, so this is an inkjet copy. But my inkjet printer uses an ink that doesn't bleed too much when it gets wet. If you have that sort of a problem, you might want to get a laser copy or go to a copy center and get a copy on an ink. Have them, make you a copy using an ink that's not going to bleed when you get it too much when you get it wet. I mean, obviously it's going to bleed a little bit simply because you're getting the paper saturated, but some inkjet printers, it would just become a blurry mess. Oh, I missed some hair right there. I can see that. This isn't, we're not aiming for perfection with this. We're aiming for altering. We're aiming for just kind of having fun, and kind of making the image a little more our own. So don't feel like if you're not much of a, like a painter, you don't do a lot of painting, that, oh gosh, I have to make this perfect. I'm not even covering all the areas. I'm trying, but I'm not making any guarantees here. Now I'm going to rinse out both of my brushes. And I'm going to go back to my smaller number 2 round. I want to catch that little bit of hair that I missed really quick. It was just a tiny little spot down here. Pretty sure that was hair. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so now I use a flesh tone that's pre-mixed because I'm very lazy. When I'm working in my art journal, I just don't want to spend a lot of money mixing up flesh tones, or a lot of time mixing up flesh tones if I don't have to in my art journal. So I'm just going to take that flesh tone along with a little bit of white and some water. I just want a hint of a flesh tone for this. I don't want to spend a lot of time painting all of the skin. So it's almost going to be more like a wash. I'm just going to start with her hands. I just don't want her to be quite as ghostly as she is here. But I'm no means attempting to paint this naturally or anything like that. Now it doesn't matter whether you like to use a round brush, a flat, a filbert, which is kind of a slightly rounded tip, but otherwise flat. It doesn't matter what type of brush you like to use. All of them will achieve the same desired result. It's just whatever is you're the most comfortable with. I prefer the round because I can get a nice edge on it. Now I'm not going to go over her teeth, but I am going to go over her lips. I'm not going to go over the whites of her eyes, but I'm going to go over the rest of the face. sure I'm gonna make it with this little bit of pink that I mixed up. Should have mixed up more. Okay. Now I just want to get some of this brown that I made. Oops, that's the wrong spot. Some brown, some flesh tone, and then a little bit of white, and get a little wash and use that to do a little shading. Now this face was really blown out, so there's not a lot of shading to work with, so I'm going to fudge it and make up my own shading as if there was more shading there than there is. And I use my fingers to do most of my blending work. Let's see. I'm actually making up a light source even. You don't have to do this if you're not a face painter or a painter of people. If you are, by all means, feel free to paint up your little face that you're working on however you want it. I hope you've seen all of this on camera because apparently I keep working further and further down, don't I? Which is pretty annoying. Let's see here. Okay, clean up all of this off the table so that I can figure out how to get her a little more centered. Okay, now I'm actually going to go into just water, a little bit of the flesh tone, and a little bit of the fluorescent pink. I'm going to use this for her lips. I kind of got to hover here a little. Hopefully I'm not blocking the camera. I should get my glasses out and put them on. You can see both her upper and her lower teeth, so to keep that in mind. And then I'm going to give her just a hint of some color to her cheeks. And then I'm just going to use this to accent a couple of places on her little face. Sort of in a way mimicking the areas of the face that would be a little more pink if you had a nice tan. That's kind of where I'm at. And then I'm just going to add a tiny bit of Payne's Gray and Burnt Sienna. Kind of getting a little bit more of a reddish shadow. I forgot to shadow to add some shading to the hands and the arms. And again, I'm just going with what I think naturally you would see because the photo is so blown out. There's no real way to know what the shading would have looked like. I didn't push that away soon enough. I'm going to add just a little bit of white. And some flesh tone. And now I'm just going to go into some plain white with water. And I'm going to put in some highlights as well as fix that arm. Kind of ran out. It happens to me a lot. I'm just trying to make sure that I get enough on there that it's actually going to hopefully show up when everything dries. Because you have to remember when you're working on a face like this, you know, right now it's wet. What is that? There we go. It's wet, and when it dries, the highlights might fade away if they're not strong enough. But if they're too strong, then they stick out and look funny. So and then I want to darken her upper lip just a tiny bit more. And then I think she should have, I have no idea, no way to know what color her eyes are unless I like maybe found out who the model was and went and looked her up online. But I'm going to say she has blue eyes. And I'm just going to use some of the Process Cayenne that I love. And just going to put a tiny bit in there to give her some blue eyes. Now for her hair, I'm going to go with a little bit of the burnt sienna and some white, which is going to give me kind of a reddish orange. And then I'm going to add a little bit of the flesh tone to that along with a little bit of the yellow. So it's going to be kind of like an orangey golden sort of color. Not quite as yellow as what I used on the hair to begin with. And then I'm just going to mix that really well. Clean off my brush. Make sure my brush is good and wet. And I'm just going to do some individual strands. Or big huge lines because I'm not doing strands. I just want to get some varied color in here so that she has basically, you know, like low lights and highlights happening. And even though I did use a wash of color before, so I didn't, it's not like I obliterated what was already there. I didn't. But I just want to make sure there's a clear distinction there. And then I'm just going to go for a lot of white mixed with a little bit of that color and get a wash of that. And then you try to use that to hit a few lighter areas. Hopefully without making the line too thick. Alright, and then I'm going to let all of that hair dry. And once it dries, then I'll go over it with a wash again of the yellow and some water. So I'm just going to show you, whoops, a little bit of a close-up here of what I've got. Okay, so that's our girl so far. I'm going to go ahead and pause this and heat gun her to make sure she's nice and dry, and then I'll come back. Okay, I cheated a little bit. I worked ahead. All I did was just put another coat of the yellow over her hair and dry it. And then I took it to my printer and I made a copy of it, and I said make it original size plus 40%. So on my copier, I just type in 140% and it knows to increase the size. So the only thing is my printer doesn't scan the pinks very well, so I need to put the pink back in. If your printer copier is able to capture the pinks, you won't have to do this part. I don't like the fluorescent pink for the face straight on unless I'm intentionally, you know, doing a really neon face. So what I generally do is mix it with some of my flesh tone, and I try to get two different mixes, one that has a little more flesh tone and one that has a little less. So for the upper lip, I use the one that's a little bit darker of a pink. Can you see what I'm doing, Hope? There we go. Okay, so for the upper lip, I use the slightly pinker, darker color. And for the bottom lip, the lighter color. And I usually use the bottom lip color if I'm going for, you know, a little bit more natural blush. Then I use the lighter pink. If I'm going for a more shocking blush color, then I use the darker pink that I used for the upper lip. I'm just going to use the pad of my finger to kind of move that paint around a little bit there. This side's pretty much covered up by hair, You're not going to see that much over here. And then I'm just going to add a little more water to it. Get just a little more of a wash over there. I also did do, forgot to say, I did do a little fancy cutting before I made my copy, just to get a little closer to all of the edges. Clean the paint off here. So I'm going to hit her again with the heat gun and dry her really quickly and go ahead and fancy cut her out. And then when I come back, we will work on trying to pull together our other collage along with our focal image here.